this the 35th live stream for those that are doing the math. Hey there, hi there, ho there. Hope you're having a great, what day is it today? Wednesday? Great Wednesday. I just want to quickly pull this up on my mobile device so that I can see all of the chat messages from all of the viewers at home. Feel free to post a message in the YouTube chat, and I will respond to you in real time. All right, let's jump on into the content for today, which is quite a bit. I have got quite a bit of content lined up for you. Just want to spot check the title. Looks good. I'm actually, believe it or not, thinking about doing 2 live streams today, maybe one in the afternoon, because I've just got too much content to talk about. Okay, first up in the program. First up in the program is I'm going to respond to all of the LinkedIn comments I got yesterday. So the post I did yesterday related to developer productivity notifications kind of blew up a little bit, got a lot of replies. So I am going to respond to them here in video format. All right, let's jump on in. First up. Now, there were 2 posts. This is the more fleshed out post, which my writer did, and I got a reply from Jason Grimm, who's a really cool guy, by the way. I think this is too much of a broad stroke. If I told someone that I didn't fix a site outage because I was in the zone, that I have notifications off, I wouldn't be employed too much longer. Maybe a junior dev or a contractor can be unplugged from an organization. However, it's too unrealistic. Okay, I think a better tip is to be more organized with your notifications. Have only certain Slack channels alert you, maybe ping on keywords. Email check every 30 minutes or something, and complete disconnect. I've worked on small large teams having a shared channel to post questions, hover, and send stuff. If you're not watching, okay. So a couple things I agree with here, a couple things I disagree with. And one of the things that I don't know exactly what my writer did with this post. Hopefully that it was more fleshed out based on the video I did yesterday. But again, there's 2 posts. The second post was a quick one I posted without fully clarifying all the specifics. And so there are definitely cases where, what I think is that as a developer, you need do not disturb sessions, which are, let's say 2 to 3 hours, just for the sake of argument. I disagree with the 30-minute time frame. Now I could be wrong, but I'm just gonna just to put some specific stakes in the ground. I do disagree with the 30 minutes, so I'm gonna call them 2 to 3 hour sessions where you get in the zone, you really focus and get work done. And so, site outages. This is actually 2 people brought up the question of site outages. That is definitely something that should be carved out. So there's a couple of things that. So even when you're completely in the zone with no notifications, you need to be reachable in the case of true emergencies. So that could be a family emergency. You get a call on your phone. You should be able to see that. And you can whitelist certain contacts, whatever, because you don't want to get I think you don't want to get every single phone call to interrupt you, right? Because then you're getting all the random spam phone calls interrupting you. True emergencies, family emergencies, obviously site outages. If you're responsible for site outages, there needs to be a channel that will ping you on those, obviously. Now, hopefully, the term I used was as a developer, hopefully as a developer, you're not, responsible for every site outage. Hopefully you have some DevOps people or whatnot that can be first line of defenses. But I agree there. And when I say no notifications whatsoever, what I mean is cutting out the notifications that are not truly critical, so that you're only getting the truly critical notifications. I think a better tip is to be more organized with your notifications. So this is what Jason's touching on, is to be more organized with your notifications, which is essentially what I'm saying. I think the devil's in the details on what that exactly means. I disagree on email check every 30 minutes. Now, it depends on what exactly your role is, right? Again, if you are a client-facing point of contact who also does development, if you're a team lead who also does development, that's a different role. But to the extent that you are a full developer whose job is to produce code, that puts you on one end of the spectrum. To the extent that you're a manager whose job is to coordinate people, that puts you on the other end of the spectrum. Managers should basically not go into the zone for multiple hours at a time. So I just don't think 30 minutes is enough to get into true productivity. There's a graphic which I found, which I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pull up here. Well, I think I can, because I can just go over to my Twitter account. Of course, the UI on mobile, well, not on mobile, the UI on this smaller screen size is horrendous because nobody actually cares about, and I can't see my tweet replies from a logged out view. So, oh, perfect. Here we go. That's what I was looking for. This is the graphic I was looking for. Excuse me. So we've all seen this. We've all seen this graph. You have a significant ramp up time to get into a flow state as a developer, and interruptions pull you out of it. It takes a super long time to get back into it. So this is what I'm talking about right here. All right, next up. Oh, I've worked in large teams, maybe a shared channel, post questions. So then back to the question of working, collaborating together as a team. Totally agree. There's a super lot of value in some of the most effective dev teams I know are effective because of the ways in which they can help each other in a Slack channel and things like that, get each other unstuck. However, I strongly believe that you want that communication to be asynchronous. Within, you do your 2 to 3 hours, hour and a half, whatever it is. You do your do not disturb time as a developer. You come up for air in between. You do your communications in the coming up for air. And that can be responding to people in Slack. That can be checking email. That can be whatever. But that's my take on it. Okay. Next post. This one is where I got a lot of comments. And this was a more simplified post. Again, I just quickly... Come on, LinkedIn. Are you going to load this for me or not? Let's get with the program here, buddy. Is my internet down? If my internet's down, oh, and of course my window closed. I think I need to keep my video playing. I got to keep my video playing in order to have the comments show up consistently there. Okay, so this was a more simplified thing. I posted it without... It was a quick post. I didn't, again, post the nuances of you shouldn't have notifications off all day long. It's about the do not disturb sessions. And even within that, there should be certain notifications that are carved out. But I am going to try to reply to all 20 comments here. All right, here we go. Philip Collin, depends on if you want to be successful or not. Many times client success depends on progress or response. If you're waiting until the end of a work period to check, then you question that you response urgently. Now note that, and we can see titles and things. And of course, I'm not going to say anything in this stream that's based on any private information. This is all based on publicly visible job titles and stuff like that. So as a VP of technology, you are fundamentally more client facing and probably more in a managerial role than a pure developer role. So that goes back to the previous point on those differences in roles. I think it's okay to silence him for periods of time, which is, again, I agree there. Better suggestion is to have blocks of time, maybe 1 hour. So maybe an hour is, I talked about this earlier in the video. I feel that you probably need more of a 2 to 3, but an hour is better than nothing. If you're not necessarily when you turn them off, then you use the next 30 minutes to an hour to review and respond. If you're a remote company, this is near impossible. So I strongly disagree that I think that as a remote company, I understand the tendency as a human when you're remote to want to over-communicate. I think it's important to over-communicate, but I think that you should over-communicate within a framework of asynchronous communication. Being remote does not mean we need to work synchronously. And I want to flesh that out. You need to update some of the status. Yeah. So I appreciate the feedback here. Got a lot of likes. A lot of people agreeing there. But that is my response. Dimitri, schedule chunks of time, like 15 minutes for a quick check. Completely agree. I'm on the same page here with Dimitri. 15 minutes, 3 to 4 times a day. That's giving you multi-hour blocks in between for do not disturb. Use filters, inbox rules to group automatic notifications, separate folder, press them in bulk rather than jump on it. Cool. Yes, 100% agree. Clearly set expectation turnaround times. Yes. Me and Dimitri are on the same page right here. Have someone else on your team monitor notifications. Yes, exactly. You want the managers monitoring notifications, not the developers, not the people that are, again, responsible for getting into that flow state and getting work done. Thomas Ryan, this is a struggle with remote teams. Sometimes you need a simple, quick question answered and waiting edges due to a notification being cause all sorts of waste of time by the team members. So I've touched on this earlier in the video on the topic of team collaboration. Actually, I said this in a previous video, not in this video. My opinion on remote teams is they only work with senior developers as opposed to juniors. I'm open to being persuaded on that, with the assumption that you're talking about a remote team of senior developers. Yes, it is true that if I'm stuck as a senior developer, I'm going to be happy if my fellow senior developer can unstuck me immediately. That's going to make me happy. That said, communication should be fundamentally asynchronous. And so as a senior developer, if I cannot use that hour, 2, 3 hours effectively while I'm waiting for somebody else to come up for air, which by the way, might be a lot less than 3 hours. If you've got 10 team members that are doing 2 to 3 hour do not disturb sessions at a time, you might be able to find somebody come up for air every 30 minutes, every hour. But the point is, it should be asynchronous, not synchronous. And as senior developers, you should be able to use that time effectively to research things yourself, troubleshoot yourself. And if you can't, I'd say that's more of an underlying problem there. Okay, Graham, hinders being able to work in an agile environment if you cut yourself off, just focus on specific tasks while allowing anything else that requires your input to move on or indeed adapt. So I've responded to a lot of this, I think, already in previous comments. I disagree that this is the case within within an agile environment. Whether let's say you've got your daily stand-ups where you're talking about what needs to get done, you're getting unstuck. Again, every couple of hours, people come up for air, you can get unstuck, you can collaborate. But I think it's critical to have those multi-hour do not disturb sessions. Okay, Thomas, honestly, if I'm stuck in the middle of something and I see a notification pop side of my screen, I do find I get distracted. Boomtown, this is what I'm talking about. This goes back to this graph. This is what he's saying right here. This is a fundamental fact of human nature. This is not something that varies maybe it varies by person the slightest degree, but this is fundamental to human nature. I try not to have Outlook open either while I'm trying to focus. I see the little mail icon on the bottom of my screen. It takes my focus. Correct. I've honestly come to love the Windows 10 feature of hiding all notifications. Perfect. Not too familiar with this Windows 10 feature. I think this is exactly what I'm talking about. You want to manage your notifications so that only the truly critical things pop up. Seeing every email pop up is a bad idea. Pomodoro. Okay, got Japheth here. Japheth Sanchez Rodriguez. Try the Pomodoro time management technique. It works for me. In summary, you work hyper-focus in short sprints of 20 minutes, couple breaks to then repeat a sprint to get your task done. So I've tried Pomodoro. I am a fan. I find it questionable whether 25 minutes is sufficient. At the end of the day, look, if it works for you, great. Works for you. Who cares what I say? If you're productive, then you're productive. I think that there's some hard psychological facts that these time periods, these time scales are longer than 25 minutes, but that may vary by person. I do think what's critical is that you have hyper-focused sessions. Okay, we got Asrar here. Following anything unrelated to work frequently without necessarily unprofessional, mute or leave the Slack channels you don't need your visibility on. This actually helps me. Yep, agree. So we've touched on this already. Mukit Mukhtar, it's not. As these systems are introduced for team collaboration, if there are quick answers while I'm busy with things, I'll always reply. And if I need to go through in details to reply, I always confirm the person can't do right now, but get back to you in a certain time. So I've already touched on this. Topic of collaboration should be asynchronous. Avoiding notifications is not a good idea for remote teams. I've touched on this already. It's up to the person as well, how they manage their own activities. It is obviously up to the person, and we all have individual differences, but I do not believe there are individual differences on this fundamental fact of needing focused work, do not disturb sessions as a developer. Most of the firms create many channels and everyone's just like, I think, yeah. So again, touching on the idea of essentially making notifications is the broad strokes here is notifications should be as relevant as possible, and you should only be interrupted by something that you really should be interrupted by. Simple as that. Okay, we got Luke here. I do find Slack very disruptive, but I can also see productivity benefits as well. Boomtown. Slack is very disruptive if you use it in a synchronous manner. Maybe having the ability to find global blackout times may help for the disruptive aspect. Right, totally. And Slack is already building in. Also, somebody mentioned Windows 10 is building this in. Slack is building it in. Basecamp talks a lot about having those times where notifications are disabled. And Slack is starting to default those disabled notifications while you sleep, which is, in your off hours where you're not at work, which is a good start. The next level, mark my words, is going to be making it easy for people to go into these do not disturb sessions for getting into flow state during the workday. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. Rob Lindman, it's going to happen. It would take an hour each day to enable and disable notifications. Disagree that it would take an hour each day to enable and disable. You can once you start doing this, it's pretty straightforward. You again, if you get into an asynchronous workflow, number one, you're going to disable Slack notifications. That's not something you're going to enable and disable throughout the day. You're just going to disable them, and you're going to have a workflow where when you come up for air, you dive in and respond to things. So basically, you're just going to disable most notifications. Brad here. No one can be 100% available, especially if your job requires time to think through complex challenges. So off time is necessary. Agree. 100%. Zohaib, define your core coding working hours and put your status under disturb mode. Yes. It's discussed with the team and advise them to contact you. Yes, exactly. On the same page here. As a developer, my opinion is just output matters. Keep going, keep smiling, positive. If work is passion, nothing will stop. That's cool. I like the positive vibes here. Yes, I agree. At the end of the day, output is what matters. Output is the North Star. Output is the only truth, right? But I do think that it is a fundamental fact of human nature, again, that it is impossible to have optimal output with constant interruptions. That's just a fact, I believe. Harpreet, divide the day and do not serve slots for coding. Yes, exactly. If you get distracted by a notification, you need more focus on the work you're doing. Otherwise, you'll get distracted by even a fly that passes by. There's a difference between a fly passing by and an email notification that you see, right? The urgency to check emails or respond to Slack message almost really is not an outside force. Interesting. The urgency to check the emails or respond to Slack messages almost immediately is not an outside force. That's an interesting phrasing there. It is literally an outside force in the sense that if I see a Slack notification pop onto my screen, that's an outside force intruding on my visual field. And I think that's what we want to not do. So you have the choice as an individual to disable those so that outside forces can't steal your attention, or that you manage the ways in which they can steal your attention. And then got a reply to Harpreet here from Amandeep, which he replied to. Jose, what's the context? Work-related or personal messages? If work-related, having notifications on or off is irrelevant. If they're on, I can still ignore them. If they're off, I can worry about them. Disagree. I've touched on this already in the video. You cannot ignore notifications if they're on. The context is work notifications, actually. That's a good clarification there. Appreciate that. You cannot ignore notifications when they pop up. They will distract you. You've seen that already in previous comments. I've talked about that in so far in the video. The real question is what should be expected as developers? What is considered professional courtesy? If you're unable to handle interactions, get a buffer. I personally dislike Slack and the whole notion of to opine. Exactly. So this is where we're touching on the same thing here where he says he dislikes Slack. A lot of people saying that. If personal notifications, if you're going to, yeah, so that's a separate topic. So I think I've touched on most of these issues already. Last one, Kate. A limited off time is acceptable, but not being online is an absolute no. If the client talks to you from the chat, something the thinking cap gets removed, distracted. Exactly. Someone follow hybrid, agile, daily scrum. Exactly. Daily scrum, twice a day, 15 minutes. I'm all for that. All right. It's all about getting into flow state sessions in between the communications. Okay, so that's it. Not too shabby there. 21 comments that we responded to. How long have we been going for here? 21 minutes? Holy cow. This could be this could be like the live stream in and of itself. It's already almost 9 o'clock. I tell you what, I am going to just do one more topic, and then I have like a bunch of other topics. I might even do the rest of them in the afternoon. We'll see. Okay, so this is a separate topic, but it's essentially related to comments that I got from the original tweet, and it is to say that what I want to talk about is asynchronous work. So fundamentally, for I'm going to keep saying for developers, and again, the broader point is if you're in a role where it's your responsibility to do sort of deep work, individual contribution, maker versus manager. If you're on the maker side of the maker schedule, manager schedule, your responsibility is to coordinate. So you need to be available at all times. To the extent that you are a developer, somebody that needs to do focused work, your communication should be fundamentally asynchronous. This is one of the reasons why you're hearing more and more people say they dislike Slack. Slack, sort of as great as it is for a lot of things and for feeling sort of the heartbeat of a team, which is neat, it sort of forces synchronous communication because of the nature of the way it's designed. That's something that they're making some efforts to change with the way that notifications can be disabled, and they're doing that by default for your non-working hours, but it needs to go further. There needs to be an easy button you can press, probably not even on Slack, probably on your computer. There needs to be a button you can press which says, I'm about to do focused work for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. There's no magic number. I'm going with 2 to 3 hours. Let's just call it 2 hours for a simple number. I'm going with 2 hours just to give a specific number. Some people have said it could be an hour. Okay, some people have said Pomodoro 25 minutes. I don't know if that's possible. Like your ramp up time takes time as a developer, fundamentally. So let's say 2 hours. There should be a button on your computer where you press that, and on your phone, and you get no notifications unless they're mission critical. So if you're responsible for site outages, you should get a site outage notification. If you obviously have a family emergency, you get a call on your phone, that should come through. You should not see every phone call because that'll distract you. You should not see every notification. You should not see every email. I think that it's interesting that as more and more people are working remotely, you would sort of think that along with that, they're working asynchronously, but it actually may even be having the opposite effect, that as people are working remotely more, they're more likely to work synchronously. And it is super important to over communicate when you're in a remote role, because if you don't do that, it feels like you're not there or you're doing something else, or how do I know as your boss that you're even working? So I think human nature is to over communicate, even to a detriment of your actual productivity. So I think the most effective thing to do is to say, look, I'm remote. You hired me because you trust me. Here, set expectations clearly. Here is my workflow. I go into do not disturb flow sessions for 2 hours at a time. I then come up for air. When I come up for air, I'm going to respond to everything. I'm not going to miss anything. I'm not going to let anything drop between the cracks. You got to have a good solid system to make sure that you're responding to anything that anyone expects you to respond to within sort of like, you need like a personal SLA. You need like a personal expectation, a service level agreement of what your response times are as an individual, so that as your boss, I ping you on something. I'm not going to hear back within a minute because that would disrupt you and ultimately hurt your productivity, which is what I'm paying you for. But I am going to hear back within 2 hours, 3 hours. And I know that, and I can trust that, and I can rely on that system. So we need more asynchronous work fundamentally across the boards. We need that. Some people will say, well, it's a personal preference. It's only a personal preference to the extent that you're on the manager end of the spectrum. If you're on the developer end of the spectrum, I disagree that it's a personal preference. I think it's a fundamental fact of psychology that there's a ramp, and the way the brain works, that there's a ramp up time, interruptions pulling you out of that with an expensive re-ramp up period. So that's my take on it. I think we should do more asynchronous work. And I'm going to call that for today. That's the stream. I have 12 more topics that I didn't get to, but that's cool because I think there were some really good nuggets in here. And I might do a stream later this afternoon. We shall see if I get real motivated. But that's it. So have a great Wednesday, and I'll